response to those numbers. Everybody?
Yes, please.
All right. I just take the opportunity to thank you all for hearing me today. I've been a resident here for 9 years, and I got my notice letter in the mail, as everyone did. It said 54%. Wow. I mean, I know property prices have been going up, so that didn't strike me as immediately, a problem. But I checked on my own property and said, well, what was my increase? My increase was 58%, while the average was 54%. And that, given my nature, I'm a software developer, I work in data, said, why am I higher than the average? And if I'm higher than the average, someone else must be lower than the average. And let's figure out why that is. I have a background in data sciences, which has taught me that averages as a number tend to camouflage outliers. When you look at a data set and only look at the average, you're not seeing the entire picture. And I wondered if outliers were causing increase. I have the ability to check for outliers in the assessment. It's rather large, but the data is all there, and I wanted to see if my assessment was correct. So I got all the data and I plotted it. This is a scattered graph showing the assessment change of every single property in the town from 24 to 25. If you're not familiar with scatter graphs, there's a trend line on there. That trend line is our 54% increase, right? The closer you are to that trend line, the closer you are to 54%. It is statistically sound. That trend line is very strong. You can see that all the properties are bunched up right by it. However, if you look below the line, you'll see what are traditionally considered outliers. This is a data point that is far away from the trend line. And in this way this is plotted, these are properties that are well below the average 54% increase. Okay. I circled in red 8 properties that I felt needed further inspection because these are well below 50% average. And I wanted to know why. I'm a curious person. I want to know where my taxes are going. Let's figure out what these mean. This is the list of those 8 properties. Okay. Key things that you probably want to look at on this chart. I know there's a lot of data there. The percent assessment change of them. Remember, we're going 54% increase. The top 2 you will see actually went down, -33% and -9% in value year-over-year. Why is that? Is there a justification for that? Further down, you will see other properties that had moderate increases, 11%, 13%, 12%. Those were commercial properties, and as stated earlier, the commercial average was lower than residential. So those are outliers, but not necessarily anything that I would consider to be overtly mysterious, right? They're just a little bit lower than residential. There's 2 that went very low, -74%, -71%, and those were obvious. There was a parcel split. There was improvements removed from the property. You take a property that had a house on it, there's no house there anymore, of course the value is going to be much lower. We can ignore those. The top 2 were my concern. I looked at those as residential properties and said, why did these get such a dramatic decrease in their assessment? Now, I am clear and I understand that this meeting is not about talking about tax bills. This is about assessment. But I will give you some information about tax bills because I think it illustrates the point. If you look at the percent bill change of those properties, they will, given a projected tax levy the same in 25 as 24, see a -56% decrease in their tax bill. And their taxes will be lower by approximately $11,000. On the second one, you've got a -40% bill change, and their taxes will be going down $9,000. Again, presuming that the tax levy in 2025 is in 2024. That's not going to happen, but it at least gives you a point of reference. So I said, what is going on with these properties? And I looked at them and I sent correction requests to Accurate Appraisal in August. I sent them information about both of these, my assessment of what happened and why the evaluation were one of them was not Accurate corrected, and it's corrected on the roll, and I verified that today. It was a kind of special circumstance. Someone bought a home in 2022. They raised that home and put up a new home on that property. In 2024, the building inspector went out, did his occupancy inspection, and said, here's the new value of your home. It's much higher than it was before you built this house. However, the sales analysis from the 2022 sale was still used to arrive at the assessment value. So effectively, the assessor still said, I didn't know that there was a new house built there. I'm assessing what the old one sold for in 2022, and here's the value. On correction, they moved that value from 1.08 million to $2 million for that property. And I consider that to be a reasonable correction. The second parcel that I sent them has a bit more going on, and there was no correction made. I verified that this prior with the clerk. I wanted to see if this would be corrected by accurate before order review, and it has not been. This one has again, a sale in 2022. It was part of two parcels in that sale, and the assessor used the traditional methodology of time adjusting that value to get to a value for 2025. Right? Unfortunately, standard sales analysis is not going to be valid for this property. And I will show you why. A correction of this is still necessary to make the assessment fair and balanced, and is the reason for my objection. Okay. I'm going to give you a first litmus test to think about as I go through my explanation. If this home was presented to you, a 6-bedroom, 6-bath, 5,000 square foot home on 5 wooded acres, who recently remodeled their kitchen, and it was listed for $745,000, do you think that's fair market value? Or is that a deal of the century? Let's explain what happened. In 2022, there was actually a 4-parcel sale for a total value of $1.5 million that involved this property. And that sale was split specifically across 2 deeds. So on the same day, they produced 2 deeds, sold 2 parcels on one deed, 2 parcels on the other deed. Total sale value, $1.5 million. The split, you'll see below there, was $900,000 for the 2 parcels that had the home and an empty lot. Second deed was a sale for $600,000 for 2 managed forest land parcels. You can see that 900 plus 600 gets you to 1.5 million. That is the total deal that occurred in 2022. That sales structure undervalued the home. Over $400,000 of improvement value from the home was shifted into the untaxed MFL parcels by assigning $600,000 to the forest parcel deed, where the assessment on those properties were $156,000. That left $900,000 to put on the second deed, where the home and the empty lot were, which were assessed in that year for $1.3 million. You can see $400,000 went from 2 parcels to 2 other parcels. The assessor only evaluated that $900,000 transaction when coming up with the fair market value of that property, causing them to assign just under $500,000 to the improvements of the home and $468,000 in land value on those 2 parcels. My problem, and the core reason I'm here today, is that this undervaluation of the improvements puts an unfair tax burden on every other property owner in the town. You can imagine if everyone's at market value, we're fair and equal. If one property is half of its actual value, now everyone else has to pay a little bit more to make up for that difference. So by doing this, every other resident in the town with property is disadvantaged. These are the numbers if you look at the 4-parcel sale in total, rather than only evaluating the 2 pieces across the 2 deeds. And important things I want you to look at on the left-hand side, in 2022, total assessment of those 4 parcels is $1.4 million. In 2025, that drops to $1.1 million. Something has happened to the assessed value of those properties. If you only look at the $900,000 sale line, it makes sense that 965 is the time adjusted value of something you bought in 2022 for $900,000. That's what the assessor did for us. But I'm saying, how did that assessment drop $400,000? And the simple answer is, when the sale was made, a lot of value of the home was shifted to the MFL parcels. And you all know MFL parcels receive no income or no property tax. You don't pay property tax on forest lands. And again, I don't want to talk about tax bills. I know that is not the purpose of this meeting, but I want to illustrate what is going to happen if this is left on the roll. In 2022, the BOR parcel total is $21,000 in taxes, right? No money on the MFLs. They don't get taxed. 2024, the tax bill was $24,000. Using my projection of same tax levy as this year as last, this parcel, given all the data, will have a tax bill of $11,000. And it seems suspicious to me that a tax bill should go from $24,000 to $11,000 if there hasn't been any material change to the property. In fact, to the opposite, there were improvements made to the property, which can be verified through the permit that was pulled through modification. So my second litmus test for you, as I wrap this up, this property was assessed around $1 million since 2006. The last 20 years, this thing has been $1 million. It's been assessed at $1.1 million since the sale in 2022. And there has been no challenge or review at board to say that that value is too high for this property. So why is it only worth $745,000? The core purpose of my presentation here today, I actually think my property fair market value is correct. This was just me showing you that because another property is dramatically undervalued, I will pay more taxes, as will every other member of the property owners in this town, because of that underassessment. We need a fair and equitable rule so that no one can take advantage in the tax bills. So I believe there's adequate reason to question the accuracy of that specific assessment, and it needs to be reviewed by the Board of Review. And I've linked to the state statute that does clarify that you, as the Board of Review, have power to review any property, even if it is not directly objected on, if you believe there is cause that it is at an assessment value that is too low or too high for market value. And I'll finally state that I don't think the other town residents should pay higher taxes. That should conclude my presentation. Unless anyone has any specific questions now.
We'll do questions after.
Okay.
Accurate, any testimony surrounding this for information?
As a rebuttal?
Board members, any questions?
My only question, I do have a question. My only question is, it's not really a question, it is a point that I want to make. That the value in a purchase is between the buyer and the seller. It is up to the buyer and the seller to value that purchase. In this case, it was divided into four different parcels rather. And it is up to the buyer and seller to decide how that's going to be divided up. That is not up to us to decide. And, you know, for a variety of reasons, they decided to divide it up. A $1.5 million total value into four different parcels the way they did. Could be for tax reasons. It could be for accounting, you know, their own personal tax reasons. Whatever it was, the buyer and seller agreed that $1.5 million would be divided up the way they chose to do. So it's not asking a question.
I'm sorry to interrupt, because we should take that up at the end of the testimony when we have a chance to deliberate.
Okay, so you truly are looking for questions, not points.
Sure.
Okay, clarification, understood.
And accurate, you said you have no rebuttal to that. Mr. Hagan, any other witnesses?
I know.
And now we move into where accurate can present your case in support of your assessment.
So our case in support of the assessment does actually kind of coincide with what the resident brought forth. And if you guys do decide that you want us to take a farther look into things, just to make sure that everything's okay, we absolutely can. That is up to your discretion. So what we have here is the sale doc that we received from the state, the sale listing, and then the Mercurian hire. So the first is the Mercurian hierarchy. It does state that this is how we're supposed to assess. In the first thing that we're supposed to look at, is there an arm's length sale of the subject property? The resident mentioned it. You can also see in here, there is an arm's length sale of the subject property. So then it does suggest or say that we must use that sale. And if we go to the next page, it'll have the transfer return of the sale, where it's two different parcels. It is back to back, sorry about that. So it is two different parcels in the sale, and you can see on the second page, the fee is $900,000 for the two parcels. And then the third page here is the MLS listing, that this was listed for $900,000. You can see the sold price is $900,000, the date it was sold, that it was an arm's length sale, and that it was on the market for 12 days. Based on the Mercurian hierarchy, we have a sale doc that lists the two parcels involved in this specific sale. And we have a listing that says it was on the market for $900,000. So to the assessor, we have a valid sale. We use the valid sale price, split it out between the two parcels, in time adjusted that sale, which we it is a separate sale doc for those other two sales. But what we have is the listing of 900,000 or 900,000 sold for 900,000, and the sale doc that goes with it, which matches up with the Mercurian hierarchy and using an arm's length sale to set to them.
Any other comments, any sick witnesses that you want to comment also?
No.
Okay. Do you have any questions for the accurate assessors?
This just, why would you not evaluate both deeds that happen on the same date?
If you could amplify a little
Yeah.
bit. It's not-
My only question is, why would you not have looked at both deeds from the sale on the same day that involve both parcels? This listing shows that you're going to be buying 55 acres of woods and prairie. Well, that's the MFL parcels. Where are they?
There are two separate sales that came in with 4 separate parcels, well, 2 on one and 2 on the other. We treat them as separate sales.
Do you normally just kind of say MFL is easy, it's just land, there's a stated value what MFL should be? It doesn't really come up because it doesn't apply to the tax basis. Are they less, I guess, scrutinized?
MFL?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an expert in the MFL process. We do have an MFL expert. So I apologize that I won't have a very good answer for you, but we do have a full process that they go through. They get the MFL information, they go through, they evaluate it, and put it on.
Was this home inspected this year in person?
Each, it 1695. We did talk to the owner twice. We do have a permit that is out but not completed yet.
And that would be the remodel kitchen permit.
Yep, you know, it's not completed yet, so next year we will go through and check the completion of that one.
Does the permit indicate the dollar amount? Sometimes the contractors state how much.
It
the
has a
job
zero
would
on the estimate on it for the kitchen remodel. There was also a service upgrade with
Right, the
that.
300 pounds.
Yeah.
When permits like that are pulled, and I guess you're saying that inspection happens once the work is complete.
Yeah, so we'll go out and look at it depending on the time of the year. And look to make sure that, is it complete, is it not complete? Seeing as this permit was pulled in late November for a full kitchen remodel, it's likely not gonna be complete as the first of the year. And then we can go and check it in 2026 to make sure that it is complete.
And so your assertion is that the time adjusted sale is kind of the gold standard of what I should use to look at value. And it's not as important to look at a assessment that went from 1.1 million in 2024 to $745,000 in 2025 and not ask that question.
No, you can absolutely ask that question. We do see sales bring values down quite a bit. It's not unusual to have a sale for a property that comes through and lowers the property's value. Just like it's not unusual to have a sale that's higher.
Right.
We just did an interim market update in the city of Burlington, and we saw a bunch that went down and a bunch that went up, just depending on kind of where you were at and what the market was suggesting.
Do you consider that fair market value?
I consider it set to value based on the Mercurian area. And that is the way we are supposed to assess.
Unless other circumstances maybe prevent that as being a valid analysis.
Correct. And if the board wants us to take a farther look, we can.
Question.
Any questions from the board? Any, from either party, any additional information about your positions?
No, I guess I will state that, you know, again, the objection to my own property isn't because I think my property is wrong, but it suffers the effect of this property causing everyone else to see higher than they should valuations because this is not a market value. I made two requests. One they corrected. That one brought $900,000 of value back onto the roll. I think it's important to assess this one too, to say, why is this circled in green the absolute farthest outlier in the data set? It is going to receive the most significant decrease in its tax liability against all the other properties this year. And as I outlined, that is going to turn a tax bill that was $20,000 on this one property last year into $9,000. And that $11,000 will be made up by the other residents in this town.
Any other questions? Is that a couple?
I'm gonna try to ask a question. We'll try. The assessors have an analysis that says that they can adjust things that are not at arm's length. They've determined that this is an arm's length such a deal. That somebody got such a deal, we don't know why. Do you have some evidence that this was not an arm's length purchase?
I believe it is an arm's length purchase. I believe the parties were unrelated during the transfer, but the seller wanted $1.5 million for all four parcels, right? And they got that. Okay. I don't know whether it was the buyer, the titling agent, or some other person who said, let's split this 900 and 600. That is the core problem that I have and see is that that split seems to not reflect the assessment values. Because you can see that that $900,000 sale bought $1.3 million of property, and the $600,000 sale bought $156,000 of property. Why would you do that? What would be the, I don't know. I'm just here to present this evidence to you guys to say, that might be something to look at, to understand a deal structure where, yeah, 1.5 million, great. How would you like to do this? Well, let's split it into 2 sales today so that I buy these 2 parcels and these 2 parcels. And here's the amount of money that we're going to assign to each of them. I don't know if there's a check and balance for title agents to say, is that accurate? Does that matter? I personally don't. I don't know who looks at that and structures that deal that way and says, this is how we're going to close this transaction. And I don't know if they are aware. If I do that, how will that affect an assessor's work later? Do I know what the assessor is going to do when I split it that way?
We have an awful lot of noise back here, so I'll carry this again. Do we have 2 separate owners, or do we have the same owner of 2 resulting parcels?
The resulting parcels are all purchased by the same owner in 2022. There's an arm's length deal between 2 unrelated parties to buy 4 parcels.
Okay, but we do not, but it sounds like you're saying there's not an arm's length deal in the assignment of the values between the parcels.
I don't know. I don't know what happened on that closing day. I'm not aware of why someone assigned the values they did. I don't want to make any accusation or insinuation about intent. But it may just be that the buyer said, I want 1.5 million. Doesn't matter. That's two chunks. What do I care? Great, $900,000 check, $600,000 check. I'm on my way. Thank you. I don't know who had the intent to split it that way and what their rationale is. And maybe that's something to explore.
I'll formulate something. Let's see. We have questions.
Okay.
I have another question too, when you're
Why
done.
don't you go ahead?
Do you know that the MFL values are deflated or inflated?
I do not know. I trust that the assessor data is correct. And on the assessment roll, that is the number. I have a comp of MFL parcels that was sold in 2022 that lines up pretty closely with that.
With the $400,000 or the $600,000?
No.
With what?
With a $5,000 per acre assessment. $600,000 is almost $20,000 on that property. So it was, I would say, an outlier in terms of how it was sold. And there may be a reason. Something about that property that's great. It's adjacent to your home. Again, I can't insinuate any intent on why that number was used by us.
And
First, I would just wanted to say thank you for spending the time to analyze the data. I think it could be helpful, and I think the town may talk to Accurate about what happens in the future, what points. But I want to bring this back to actually the point of this hearing, this review, which is your property.
Yeah, right.
So let me just pin down a couple of things. Do you have to present an arm's length documentation of an arm's length sale for your property?
Do I need to? My
I'm
own
asking, I'm just asking.
just a yes or no.
No,
This is about your property. This hearing is about your property.
yes,
Your objection to the evaluation.
right. And if this error is corrected,
I'm not talking about any other properties.
I understand that, but should this be corrected, my objection is wrong.
Do you have any documentation about sales of comparable properties, comparable to yours?
No, I don't need my property value changed.
So we covered the 70.74 requirements. And your testimony is as it is. I just wanted to make you aware though too that there's I don't have the passage verbatim, but in 70.47, there's a passage about if there are a significant number of property owners that believe the assessment, overall assessment is out of alignment, then that is a higher indicator that there may be some recalculation that has to be done. We've heard from nobody else that is objecting to widespread property values, so you are the one. And that's really not even part of what we're talking about here today. I appreciate the information. I think accurate heard, we heard, appreciate it very much. That's not the issue that we're acting. So we're going to act on your value, which you said $1,200 difference is really token to get it. And I hate to be like lots about it. But
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. And my only response to that is me and every other single property owner except this one. They may not be aware of it clearly, and I didn't want to.
Well, we are now.
Yeah.
But the town is now and accurate is now. So those are the people that matter. Okay. So we're taking that issue off because that's not really that is not part of this hearing at all. And it was side information helpful and a lot of work.
Yeah.
So what we're going to get down to after the testimony process is the question of your valuation.
Yes.
And is it reasonable?
Yes.
Is it fair? So with that, I'm just going to circle back and say, do you have any additional testimony, Mr. Hagan, or accurate?
I understand. No more information.
Accurate? Anything additional? Did you want to wrap up with anything about your assessment?
The only additional thing we would add about his specific assessment is he did mention that he thought it was fair.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
The only thing we would add about his specific parcel, his objection, is that he did mention that he thought it was fairly assessed.
And then with that, we will close the testimony. Oh, I'm sorry, before 15 seconds. Were there any other questions? No. Okay, so I'm going to close the testimony then, and we can deliberate now. Why don't we do that? We'll pick up the second case. So with, and there's some procedure to this, so let me just read it. I'm now closing the testimony in this case. I will now open deliberations in this case by asking the Board of Review members to state, based upon the sworn testimony presented, whether the assessor's valuation of this property is correct or incorrect, and we could do this in the roll call.
So it's a yes or no
This is a yes or no.
for everybody.
Yeah, so.
Sure, so how would you like me to do this? Do you want me to call a name and then are they to say yes or no to how, is it the yes that the assessor's correct?
Is correct. Yeah.
So yes, the assessor's correct.
Yep.
Okay, you want me to just call
Name's fine.
name, okay. Carl Walzer,
Yes.
Lori Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Arlen Kai,
Yes.
Steve Jernigan,
Yes.
and Tim McGraw.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and
Thank
then
you.
Barry, before you leave, I
Yeah.
have to give you this piece of paper.